Now this is a rare oddity, guys. Releasing a should you poll and analysis video before the banner is out. Alright, I hope this reaches enough of you to make an informed decision. So let's jump into it.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another video in one day. Put in a lot of effort for this one, so you guys can get it as soon as you could. So here we are. A should you poll analysis video featuring Elimine and this banner overall. So yeah, unfortunately, because of limited time, I'm not going to be able to bring you guys the community thoughts with the voting and the polls I usually do in these should you poll videos, but I'm going to try this to see if you guys take more value out of it. So if this is really helpful because it's before the banner and you're not making impulse decisions, or maybe it's helping a friend or whatever, please let me know in the comments below. And as always, smash the like button so I actually know that you guys appreciate and value this, because I use that data make these sort of decisions and hopefully help you guys quite a bit. I'm not going to waste too much intro time here. There's not really much more announcements to make. Check out the Twitch. That's where I stream my gameplay and get more feedback and questions in a really fast manner to help you guys out. Either way, we're going to take a look at the banner, we're going to take a look at the staff, we're going to take a look at Elimine, and of course I'm going to begin this video with a should you poll, just my opinion on this sort of thing, plus a sort of sentiment I've seen by quite a few people. So the banner itself. I can put this as simple as I can with some notes on the far left here on should you summon. Before I actually talk about Elimine herself and the banner, it's more important to take a look at every color and what it means to you. Keep in mind that the anniversary is upon us, and you get roughly 300 F2P-ish orbs per month based on what month it is. If you have Fed Pass, if you choose to spark something like this, that is probably more than half your orb income, and that's not even including maybe seasonals or remixes or other event type banners like AHR, so it should still be an important decision to even consider sparking something like this. Nonetheless, there are some things to consider here. So, when taking a look at legendary and mythic banners like this and trying to come to a conclusion, my best advice is to make sure that whatever you are merging is already merged, or you're someone who's like brand new or getting into a specific mode. This means that generally speaking, something like blue could be really good if you have Peony and Julia as merge projects, and then could potentially make use of Far Trace off of Happy. And this means like multiple copies of those units, because a color share means that you're likely to get almost I want to say equal amount of those units, but in reality that might not happen, so you should be happy with everything that comes out of that. In green you have something like Eitri and Odor and Fjorm. Again, good place to potentially merge up Odor or Eitri if they are merged projects already. So as a whole, everyone's scenario will be different. But since Elimine is the brand new hero here, it's important that I'm going to take a look at her and where I feel that she could matter. I'm not going to make a tier list specifically on Elimine or update it here. I'm going to do that just in like a future video. So yeah, anyways. Sparking Elimine might be warranted because she's very strong as a one-off, meaning you can put her in the 6th slot and she's going to get a lot of work done because of the nature of her staff and effects that she brings. I'm going to talk about the staff in a moment, but first I want to conclude on whether it might be summoning or not. She is extremely powerful on the level of isolation, counterplay to a lot of good strategies in both SDR, which is now a ranked mode, and AR offense, specifically because she's an Astra Mythic and you can bring her in to shut down a lot of very solid strategies. So, however, I wouldn't necessarily say you must pull for this or that you're going to be missing out by not picking her up here, and the reason for that is because if you don't already have Claude and Ashera as merge projects, you could effectively be wasting orbs here by just picking up needless copies of stuff like Claude and Ashera. If you already have stuff like Altina, Naga, and like Plumeria merged up, for example, and I mean like mid merges, then Elimine and Ashera are not really going to provide you with like any account progression in AR offense by whatever means. If you're already acing AR offense, you're not struggling in ether raids, then you don't really need her super strong effect to be winning harder. I mean, at that point, you're just saving time and wasting orbs. So what I'm saying is you should consider Ashera and Claude before going in on Elimine here, and make sure you have a good amount of orbs to also potentially pick up many merges on those characters. That's where I feel it is very important. If you're looking to get into ether raids, Elimine is probably a good introduction to that because you just shut down a lot of strong strategies. Okay, so The thing again that I want to mention is, of course, spending about almost 200 orbs of the 300 you get in a month is quite a bit, so is Elimine really worth that? Again, it just depends on those things that I just mentioned a moment ago. Every other color here just depends on your account and whether you have those things merged or not. Fodder is better picked up in other banners, not here. Just think of it as a bonus, such as Happy's Far Trace. But that's pretty much all I'm going to state on this. I don't think it's a must-have for everyone, but she is very powerful, and I won't dismiss that, and maybe a future banner you might just pick her up instead to make your experience easier. Let's move on though. So, why is she so good, and why is she even worth talking about? So, I would say that Elimine kind of fits into this role of just straight out replacing Flame, and you can even combine her with Flame. If she ends up being one of your core mythics, then you can effectively just use her as a Flame substitute because of her C skill, but also you can just add Flame, and like someone like Ascended Fjorm is just going to really benefit off of Ice Mirror and damage reduction, Hardy Fighter. All these shenanigans will just make Fjorm nigh invulnerable. The beauty of it as well is that Staff of Saint just shuts down a really like high amount of carries or just units in general that you might see on AR defense, and I've shown some examples here, but there's so many more effects that it covers that I would be spending way too much time. Those are some very important considerations on the left there that you see all over the place. Most notably would be something like Duma, who is likely maybe getting a remix soon for his Upheaval and Bridal Catria, where you're going to see all the time. Now, characters like Sigurd and Yuri benefit from their bonus movement, so they're not going to get like stalled like gravity effect like what Reeve or Stallplay does, but Bridal Catria cannot give orders, cannot give these triangle attack effects. Sigurd doesn't, he ends up just being a 3 movement cav, which is hilarious, and Yuri just ends up being a 2 movement range unit, and that is definitely some of their strengths, and being able to strip that away because of this weapon is very important. Someone like Oder, who depends on his nuke to be ready on turn 1, nope, doesn't happen anymore. And Pent is just basically standing here for Infantry Pulse and how they are deeply affected as well. Because if you just use Elimine to hit the highest HP Infantry Pulse unit, you know, the whole chain of Infantry Pulse gets shattered, or it just ends up being not as effective. However, there is something that is not really recognized, which is you can just combine a lot of these effects on defense, and by doing that, you're going to create a situation where the player has to pick what is the most impactful. What I suggest to adapt your defense into Elimine is to make sure that you just run a lot of these effects and that your team isn't just super reliant on one effect. I see a lot of defenses that are just too reliant on Bridal Catria's effect, or let's say Legendary Sigurd's 4 movement to get everyone moving and all that. Relying on those effects too heavily on one lane makes you very weak to an Elimine user. But if you just run stuff like Bridal Catria, Duma, Catapult, Sigurd on a different lane, maybe Yuri's on a different lane, and you just combine all these on different lanes overall, then you're going to make it very difficult for a player to actually choose where to use their false start effect, and you can ideally retain some value on your team as a result of that. So again, just running a lot of these effects is one answer. Another one is to actually stack a healer with odd recovery and stacking the res, of course, and just running like phantom res and trying to compete with what Elimine's base skills are, which aren't very good. They're basically like attack res push, and phantom res seal is something that someone needs to include to make good use out of her. So it's going to become like a melee scenario here where people are stacking res to avoid it. A lot of these characters here aren't really going to be able to do that, but a healer such as Forest with phantom res seal and for defense res merged up heavily could actually compete pretty well using odd recovery, and that makes him a solid soft counter. There's no real hard counter to what she does, but there's definitely counterplay, and what you want to consider, again, to make your defense better, just run a bunch of these effects. Make it tough for them to make a decision on this sort of thing, the player who plays into it, and as a result of that, you should still come out okay. I'm not going to say it's the best case scenario, but there's definitely things you can do. When we're looking at summoner duels as well, just having her as a potential option could be good. She could end up as a bonus unit as well, and those are all things to consider because you're going to run into stuff like Bridal Catria, Yuri, and Sigurd all on Summoner Duels gameplay, so it's important maybe to have her there as a potential one-off. Whether she's worth the orbs or not just depends on how heavily invested you are in those modes, which is Aether Raid's offense and Summoner duels. If you're not, then who cares at the end of the day? So yeah, let's go into some builds here and where I think she stands. First off, a quick look at her stat spread, which is mostly offensive based, and her res stat is very high, of course, because that is what triggers her weapon to do its thing. Her base kit is quite questionable if you actually look at it. I do appreciate Nudge on there because that's really important, but there is some synergy between Nudge and Trace, because if you Nudge, then you can potentially put her into a better position using that Trace skill, so that's kind of nice. Holy Ground is just pretty much Flame's effect with additional, like a Distant Guard, Close Guard effect combined into it. And that's pretty much it. So she doesn't have the Wrathful Staff effect, so she's not going to be hitting as hard, and therefore she's mostly supportive and more technical of a unit than some of the other Astra Mythics that exist. She's definitely going to be top tier as a Astra Mythic. I didn't really update it here, but if I did place her, she's probably like right beside Plumeria and Regan in terms of the best Mythics, and she will age pretty well if you ask me. Now, if you do end up picking her up as a one-off, it's really easy to use her, like as a spark here. You just give her Fortress Res on the A scale, don't worry too much about her offensive power, run that Phantom Res seal, and you have yourself like 56 res when checking. Like, that's crazy already, so you're gonna likely hit everything that you want to with this. Keep in mind, people will likely try to counter Elimine's existence, and if you choose not to run a set like this, you could potentially make her far less consistent in hitting the res checks. So yeah, be careful of that. Stuff like a Fire School, for example, on defense could also be hitting her res stat and make it even harder for her to hit the res stats, similar to how Infantry School worked or Dark Shrine did. So keep that in note. But I think a Flyer School beside a unit who has high res could end up being a sort of counterplay to Elimine as well. So stacking her res is pretty important, if you ask me, at the end of the day. Okay, and the last thing I want to showcase is some more invested builds here that you could potentially use out of Elimine should you use her now or in the future. So of course, if you do end up pushing her res even further beyond, then a res boon is to be expected, plus fort defense res, as it really does maximize that res. And again, as I said, if people use stuff like Flyer Schools on defense, then you do want to push this as hard as you can, because that is a soft counterplay to her, just like how Milo is weak to Infantry School. Another really cool way you can consider using her, especially if you add in some merges, is actually giving her an HP boon and then trying to make her run Sudden Panic as well. By doing this, then you're going to give her multiple ways of supporting, which is through damage reduction, panic effects, and of course her false start effect. Now 56 HP isn't too great, so it definitely is going to need summoner support, it's going to need HP stacking, and you also want to keep that res stat pretty high. It's more of a higher investment type scenario, but it can be done and it should still hit quite a few units and will still give you some value on the turns beyond turn 1, of course. Finally, if you wanted to actually make her kill stuff, then you'd have to swap out her B skill Trace, which I actually think is still okay as it is, just keeping that and swapping it out for Wrathful Staff, and then running stuff like Blade Session in the A and Seal. Note, if you do this, then she is obviously going to start missing enemies with false start, but if you ask me, there's probably going to be multiple things you can end up targeting or hitting with false start that will end up giving you an advantage, so it might be worth actually giving her Wrathful Staff and making her offensive so she can end up killing a lot of problem units otherwise. So yeah guys, that's pretty much my take on Elimine. I do hope this short and sweet video helps you out in one way or another. As opposed, when it comes to the banner itself, I want to reiterate and conclude that this is obviously not a must pull, but it is a very strong unit. She will show up in future banners. If you're still running Fat Pass, then you can potentially pick her up then and see what sort of effect she might have. I don't really think this is needed though, unless you're strictly struggling on air offense, and if you are, then there might be even better options than starting over with a brand new mythic. New players will highly benefit from colorless in this banner, or people just getting into air offense in general will really benefit from making their experience really good here in colorless. Do note anniversary is coming, so with that being said, it might be worth at least waiting like a week and then making your decision then. Either way, let me know what you guys are planning to do in the comments below. Let me know if this format, as it was a bit quicker than the other one where I did release a should you poll after the banner was out, let me know if this helped you guys. in the comments below. It really does matter, and a thumbs up as well. If you didn't see yesterday's reaction, not yesterday's, a couple hours ago's reaction video, then go check that out as well for more info on what I think of Elimine. And yeah, that's basically it, folks. Love you all. Consider the Patreon in the description below. It really does make a difference and keeps me producing this sort of content for you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Much love. Peace.
It's over.